Today on Best of Trek, Worst of Trek, we mostly have episodes that feel like must-watches in the franchise, even though most have a ton of rough edges. I'm your host, Dustin Wing. Transforming Space at 4:14, One Night Stand, or Harbinger. In another over-sexualized plot, Trip tries out the neuropressure skills he learned from T'Pol on one of the Mako soldiers on board. Except he messes it up and T'Pol has to do some girl-on-girl rubbing action that causes her to finally confront her feelings for Trip, so she gives him a one-night stand and then ghosts him. Meanwhile, Enterprise comes upon a part of the Expanse that's been transformed by the spheres they've seen before, and find what they figure out to be one of the Sphere Builder race, testing whether our space was transformed enough for them to take over. Nice butt shot, but otherwise a pretty mediocre entry in the Xindi arc. Losing a lung at 4:13, Neelix's thoughts, or Phage. We start this episode off with Janeway finding Neelix has taken over her private dining room and turned it into a badly needed galley. The question I have, what happened to the crew galley we saw in the pilot then? Anyway, as part of the away team, Neelix comes across some strange readings while prospecting through caves. Next thing he knows, his lungs are gone, and the doctor comes up with a crazy measure of giving him temporary holographic lungs. The rest of the episode is Neelix's thoughts of hating the ceiling, and whether or not Tom Paris was going to snag his one-year-old from him. They eventually catch up to the Vidians that took his lungs, but he's not getting them back. Kes gives up one of her lungs so Neelix can live. It sets up Kes becoming a nurse, though. Discovering ghosts in the family closet at 4:12, Deanna's sister. Or Dark Page. Mrs. Troy makes her final appearance in TNG while teaching a race that communicates almost completely telepathically, and literally loses her mind. Turns out, a little girl of this race reminds her of a daughter she had that died when Deanna was still a baby and she never told her about it. Deanna goes inside her mother's mind to help bring her out of a coma and learns of the family tragedy through some surreal imagery. One of the best Loxana Troy episodes in the franchise. Wandering in the Desert at 4:11, Survival. Or Final Mission. Wesley goes on his final mission with Captain Picard before shipping off to Starfleet Academy. While en route to settle a mining dispute, they crash on a desert world, and with no water they decide to wander through the sand in a montage of sadness. Meanwhile, Riker can't bring the Enterprise to help in the search because they're dealing with a radioactive garbage scow that's ended up in orbit of a Federation planet. Picard almost dies because of the shuttle pilot's incompetence in a cave, and the pilot doesn't fare too well by the end either. Only Wesley's skills with a tricorder save he and the captain from an entity protecting the water here for seemingly no good reason. It's a pretty meh episode, but it also feels classically Star Trek. Feeling useless at 4:10, Death Wish. Or Sons of Moog. Great! More Klingon shenanigans. Worf's Klingon brother Kern shows up to the station drunk as can be, threatening violence from the moment he steps through the airlock. Apparently he can't live with dishonor and wants Worf to kill him, because that's what Klingons do. Kern almost dies twice, but Bashir and his medical ethics keep getting in the way. This gets to a point where Worf decides the best thing to do is lobotomize his brother, give him some cosmetic surgery, and pretend he's another Klingon that's lost his memory. While this gives us some touching moments, it's also just more Klingon overreaction and maybe the worst use of the incredible Tony Todd, but it's perfectly in step with Star Trek as an episode. Heading for the Great Barriers, number 409. Demigods. Or Where No Man Has Gone Before. This one is a rarity in television history, a second pilot. Though it didn't even get aired first. As the Enterprise attempts to leave the galaxy, they encounter the Great Barrier for the first time, which for some reason gives two of the crew godlike powers. When Kirk's old friend Gary Mitchell gets too powerful, they detain him and take him to the nearest Federation planet. Kirk has to outsmart a god and kill his best friend by the end. Even the psychiatrist chick dies for some reason. This one has some rough edges that clearly still needed to be smoothed out, like Spock's random emotions and Kirk's middle initial, but a classic bit of Trek that must be seen to understand Gene Roddenberry's original concepts. Getting lit at 4:08. High AF. Or, Will You Take My Hand? Who would have thought that the end of the first Federation Klingon War would be an anticlimax to a season? I thought the recap of saying last time on Discovery in Klingon was clever. But then it's into the ever drawn out Michael Burnham exposition pieces that sound poetic, but ultimately say nothing. The crew of Discovery jumped their ship inside the Klingon homeworld Kronos to plant a bomb and stop this war at any cost. Except Tilly gets high off Clint Howard's supply and figures out their plan isn't as benign as she'd been led to believe. This causes disgraced, lack of rank Michael Burnham to give admirals of Starfleet a "we must do what is right" speech, which somehow changes their mind on the whole thing. Instead, they peace out and leave L'Rell with the detonator that can blow up her home planet and make her the de facto ruler of the Klingon Empire. Hooray! Everybody wins! And no shots were fired. It does feel like a very idyllic Federation ending to a bloody conflict, but kind of a letdown of a season arc. This one's held together by gratuitous sex, drug use, and finally the near confirmation that Klingons have two dicks. A pretty mediocre cap-off to a pretty mediocre first season of Discovery. Giving up a good thing at 4:07? It's a wonderful Trek. Or non sequitur. When Harry Kim hits the cosmic lottery, he decides to give it up and go promotionless for the next 5 seasons. He wakes up in San Francisco with his girlfriend Libby, like the last nearly year of his life of Voyager never happened. He's got a good position in Starfleet that seems to be leading to a promotion, and the coffee is great. But this Harry isn't satisfied with no longer suffering, so he takes the Tom Paris from this universe to commit suicide and get him back to Voyager. This episode is ranked very poorly by many, and it has the numerous flaws I've mentioned. But I still find it to be a perfectly mediocre, fun bit of Trek that takes us back to the Alpha Quadrant for an episode. Going transgalactic at 4:06, Isosogons. Or by any other name. Here's another classic episode of Trek that's pretty decent, but every scene is stretched out to the point of wanting to change the channel. An away team is held hostage by bat belt technology that can turn living creatures to 20-sided dice made of chemicals. Spock mind melds through solid rock just because, but no one escapes. This group has traveled from the Andromeda Galaxy that will be wiped out by a radiation event, and they're looking for new places for people from their galaxy to conquer and settle. They blackmail Kirk into taking command of the Enterprise for the next 300 years or so. And we do the Great Barrier for the second time in this block of episodes. They turn most of the crew into dice and then proceed to be some of the dumbest beings we've seen in Trek. One of the best parts of the episode is Scotty trying to drink this guy under the table and pulling out progressively older bottles of booze until he gets to the classic "it's green" joke. Kirk turns the Andromedans on each other and eventually gets back control of the ship. There's a hokey fight scene in the end, and what can I say but classic middle-of-the-pack Trek? Performing a space cesarean at 4:05? Space ravioli. Or Galaxy's Child. So the Enterprise kinda, sorta kills a mother space ravioli while it's giving birth? And then the little ravioli thinks the Enterprise is its mother. All the while, Geordi finally meets his dream girl, only to find out she's really overbearing and married. But the two of them finally work together, even after she exposes his browser history, and get the little ravioli off the ship. This is another one that feels like a must-watch in the Trek franchise, even though it's perfectly average.
Computer.
That program is available.
Thanks, Major. Major, Major. Thanks, Major. Major, Major.
Warning, radiation levels at 70 millirads per minute.
Thanks, Major.
Radiation levels at 150 millirads per minute.
Major. Major.
300 millirads per minute and rising.
Thanks, Major.
Lethal radiation exposure in 30 seconds.
Thanks, Major. Major.
Radiation levels at 65 millirads per minute.
Thanks, Major.
Please state your request in precise candle power.
Major. Major.
Program loaded and ready.
Thanks, Major.
Absolutely exhausting process.
Major. Major.
Good morning.
Thanks, Major.
You'll do exactly what you want.
Major. Major.
You're all I've got.
Thanks, Major.
Take your hands off her.
Thanks, Major. Major.
Tell Will how sorry I am.
Thanks, Major.
The resin has hardened.
Major. Major. Thanks, Major. Major. Major.
Your mother.
Thanks, Major. Major. Major.
Get away from here!
Thanks, Major. Thanks, Major. Major.
You understand that
Thanks, Major.
Leave me alone.
Major. Major.
You've made the baby cry.
Thanks, Major. Major. Major.
I wish you two could have grown up together.
Thanks, Major.
Please.
Major. Major.
Affirmative.
Thanks, Major.
No temporal anomalies have been reported.
Thanks, Major. Major.
Unauthorized launch in progress.
Thanks, Major.